This is the after party. You've made it. Oh my God, the Industrial Revolution. Everybody in all that old footage is dead. You know, I'm watching that scene. There's a scene where part where the people are just pouring out of an alleyway and they just keep coming. And everybody's wearing heavy wool clothes. All the kids are just staring into the camera. They've never seen anything like it before. And I'm watching it. And even the youngest person in that scene, in that shot, is dead. You know, if that's from the early 1900s, most of them have been dead 30, 40 years. Most of them have been dead for quite some time now. And most of the people in the video, most of the people in those shots, excluding the kids, they've been dead for 60 years. And they looked so, they look so alive. And they stare at the camera. And everybody was thin. You didn't see one fat person come waddling out of that factory or that mill or that whatever that was. Not one fat person. Thank you, Industrial Revolution. You helped make everybody fat. Nobody thanks you for that. We all talk about how there's more food aplenty for everybody, but we also get to get fat, those of us in the first world. What a privilege. I mean, not one fat person. Everybody's working. Everybody's looking thin. There were a lot of other photos I wanted to use. And just some of the people were just so hard, so grim, so full of grit. Just people in those tenements staring into the camera. They'd probably never seen one before. And then some idiot is standing in their room, in their house. Can you all get a little closer? Can you try to look miserable for this? Can you stop smiling and laughing? Because I know that's what goes on in these tenements all day with the laughing and the kids and the fun. But try to look glum, everybody, here in these tenements. Try to look glum. They all stare and just look like they've been holding that expression for 5 minutes. Everything looks like a stare down. And, I doubt that's the case. They must have moved their eyes, and there's probably plenty of blurry shots from those days. But everybody's just cold and hard and tough. They had it tough. It's so crazy when we live in a world where most of our problems in our day-to-day can be tracked down to ones and zeros. It's just all sort of stuff we've made. Traffic lights that are taking a long time. Somebody programmed that thing to take too long, and now you're getting pissed about it. You don't like what's on the radio. It's all stuff that, if we just turned everything off, most of our problems would be gone because we have food. We have warmth. We have clothes aplenty. And much of that is due to the same ones and zeros. The ones and zeros are the new mechanization that's been going on. And what is it going to be called? The fourth revolution? Some sort of digital hybrid with animals, robots, and AI. It's all stuff we've conjured up, When we became civilized and industrialized and moved into the cities, we got further and further away from the kind of problems that people have had for hundreds of thousands of years. How can I stay warm tonight? What can I eat tonight or this week? Where am I going to sleep? Industrialization and modernization, the pursuit of science, all of that, it's brought us so far that now the problems we have are just ones that we build up in our own minds. And much of our minds are taken up by chasing ones and zeros in life. My card doesn't work. I got to download this app. I can't seem to get online and get my, I had it just trying to get one of these videos uploaded. All the problems we have are just these weird things we've created for ourselves out of ones and zeros. But back then, those people, once they solved where they were going to stay, I'm going to live in this filthy tenement with mold on the walls. And what they were going to eat, well, I'm going to eat this gruel made of turnips and, maybe we'll pour a beer in it. So I got eating and heating and sleeping in here. I'm pretty happy. If I came from the old country and those questions are answered for me, I'm going to be here in this house. I got to work in the morning. Everything's going to work out because I'm getting a steady paycheck of $1.94 a week. What problems did they have? Other than, cholera and disease whipping through, some flu killing their children. What problems did they have? They didn't. It was a better time to live in the sort of industrial era. The air was so good you could see it. Imagine how many problems they had that we've completely obliterated, only to create new ones for ourselves. People back then never worried about losing their PIN for their 30th app or website or whatever. I don't know what you kids do with the pins, but imagine that's your big problem. Today, my big problem was my computer dumping that video. Thought I lost it, man. I put in a lot of time, and I thought it was gone. And I couldn't believe how not as angry about it as I might have gotten, say, had JJ knocked over a glass in the kitchen. I would have lost my, if he were here, he could tell you that, something like that makes me go crazy. But when I thought I lost everything, I almost felt like I'd slipped into another timeline or another reality where it's like, oh, this is the reality where all that work I've done didn't happen, or because I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to get back in there and do it again. I spent hard days actually trying to edit this stuff because I'm not an editor. And when it disappeared, it just, when I lost my big toe, it was a very similar experience. It was there a second ago, and now it's gone, and it's never coming back. And, they tried the toe, and it stayed for a while, but it just festered, and they ended up having to cut it off. Actually, I had to cut it off. Anyway, every single one of those persons was dead. And our problems are self-created. And my problem was thinking I'd lost everything on my computer. And I was surprised that I wasn't as angry as I could have been, but it's as if I slipped into another reality. I would have gotten much more angry at JJ had he spilled a glass of milk. That's what, if he were here, he could tell you. I'm trying to work my way backwards in my head to what the hell I was talking about. Damn it, JJ. Anyway, every one of those people is dead. Gone forever, like my files for this thing. Actually, I had half of it. Half of it was still there, and the other half was gone. It was as if it had obliterated everything I'd done in the previous 2 days and only had the first 4 minutes of the video. And somehow I was able to get it back. I called my computer geek nerd friend, and he said, I don't even do computers anymore, man. It's all on apps. I don't do that stuff. But somehow I figured out a way to find it. It wasn't in my, whatever that bin is where everything's supposed to be saved. I just reopened it and used brute strength and kind of pulled on the edge of the screen. I did it with my mouse, but I was just pushing the cursor to the right side of the screen, saying, no, you will show me the rest of this video. And sure enough, it glitched and popped, and suddenly there was some footage. I quickly resaved it, and I saved everything that I seemed to have lost. It was almost as if it had frozen and not allowed my cursor going to the right. Just wouldn't gonna let it go. But I just used brute strength, like they used to use in the Industrial Revolution during those, like they used to use when everybody did everything by hand. I used brute strength, forced those ones and zeros to do my bidding. And thank God, man. I emailed the software maker. I mean, I sent out every flare I could, and I still haven't heard back from some people who might be calling me up to save me, but I did it myself. That's the spirit of those faces, those hard, bony faces and all that footage I had to sift through. It's told me that no matter what, I can just pound my way through my problems. You don't need to think about stuff. You don't need to take other people's hearts and minds into consideration. You can pound your way through things and make things bend to your will. And that's what I did with my computer. Like I would have done to any of my problems, let's say between 1760 and 18. Really, it's the real industrialization is kind of done once all the railroads are in place. It's not done, but I mean, from that point forward, it's refining the big picture stuff, mass production, getting goods to market, using rail and communications, telegraph to send message. Everything sort of accelerates to a really unbelievable pace compared to what it had been just a few decades before, when a pony had to get something across the country for you. Imagine that. I mean, even when we look back at, let's say, the 1870s, post-Civil War, and the Old West, which really only lasted about 15 or 20 years, something like that, what we think of as the West. But in the Old West, imagine, even to them, in terms of modernity, people from the Revolutionary War period would seem as ancient to them as the days of the cowboys and Indians going at each other on the plains. As long ago as that seems to us, it would have seemed even longer ago to someone in the 1870s to think back to the 1760s and 1780s. 100 years ago back then was a much longer time. They didn't have the distractions that made time whip by. They didn't have the fast-paced lives. They just had day after day after day of grinding it out. Starting that fire in the morning, getting out there and planting, or before the industrialization had spread nationwide. This is what their lives were. Just getting up every day, and everything was a chore. Everything was, no wonder they were thin. Jesus, if you had to chop wood just so you could fry an egg, you'd get in shape pretty quick. But they didn't seem like they were too, bulked up. I bet they were wiry. Every one of those people, they were wiry chimps. Just mean muscle. Angry, mean, starved muscle. None of the puffed up, steroidy, bloated kind of muscles you see these days. These people were hard. They were sinewy. Muscles like leather straps. I guess when you don't eat a lot, your body gets into that feral look. It's just you and your bones and your muscles. There's nothing else on you. But it was funny. There were some cheery faces, Some of those women working in the mills, there was footage where they just seemed to be having a great time, or at least a smile on their face. Maybe they were smiling for the camera. Ladies will do that. But they seemed so alive. I didn't feel like I was looking at a black and white representation of a person. You could actually see the sort of spirit and the liveliness that they had, even though they were working 14 hours a day at some spinning loom that, probably 3 times a month takes somebody's body part with them. Any specific loom. There'd be 100 of them on the floor, but every machine is a limb taker. And looking at that chart, it was the Allegheny County, or I think it was steel mill guys, Pennsylvania. And each red mark represented either a death or the total of deaths for that day. I think it was check marks. I'd have to look at it again. When I look at the editing, it's on a very tiny screen. I just see a red dot that indicates another guy that got knocked into a vat of molten steel or had his head crushed, something falling on him. There were people in my family who died on the job. So this goes out to them, those that died on the job, making stuff, working, doing what you're supposed to do. Those kids. I didn't really do a whole lot with the child labor. I mean, I mentioned there were girls in the hat factory, or the shirtwaist company, which was a type of blouse, I guess. Cinched at the bottom, had buttons, light fabric. I didn't know what a shirtwaist was. I didn't know that there was such a garment. I knew it had something to do with shirts. I thought maybe it's a slip, and you put something around the waist. But it's a very specific kind of very attractive shirt. If you saw it, you'd go, oh, yeah, I've seen a million, Gibson girls with those shirts on. But there were a lot of kids. I should have done more with child labor. It's not like I'm against making jokes about it. It didn't even occur to me, I go through these things. I try not to do any research. I hate, I don't want to make it any harder on myself than it is. So I just kind of, what I've gleaned over the years, I kind of make jokes about it. That's the way it works. But I'd forgotten, it just slipped my mind that oh yeah, so much of it up until the 40s was child labor, By the 40s, they started getting kids to school. Throughout the Depression, nobody was working. They might as well send kids to school. So maybe the 30s is when you start to see the child labor start to fall away. When you didn't want some kid working on a job that an elderly woman could have done. What kind of animals were we? No, I'm sure as jobs got scarce, they probably would have kept the kids, and fired off the old people. It's just a matter of time till one of them topples into something, makes a mess out of your machine, and then you have to clean it, So I guess having kids for laborers made sense, spry, they can get into places, they're fearless once they get over their fear. An adult who's afraid, they've been afraid all their life. They've lived in fear, and they've allowed fear to help define them. A kid, if a kid does something that they're afraid of, then they become immortal. Oh, I can do that now. So now I'm not afraid of it. A kid that's afraid of spiders, once they hold a spider, they're like, oh, I'm not afraid of spiders anymore. You spend 20 years afraid of spiders, you're never going to hold it. You take a kid who'd normally be afraid of a 4-ton machine with flying parts on it and moving gears and spinning at high RPMs, belts connected to it. A kid would, be afraid of that until you show him, oh, look, see, you did it. You're not afraid. Okay. Then the kid becomes confident, excels. He grows into his or her sort of most confident, competent self, and then loses, the leg from the knee down because, kids are stupid. They'll do something dumb, something overconfident. But luckily there were lots of them, One kid loses an arm or a finger or an eye. He's probably got a brother that's going to take the job next year. Next year's crop of kids comes in. They would grow them. You'd plant them in the ground, grow some more kids. Everybody had lots of kids back then. Everybody. If you didn't have lots of kids, you were gay or something was wrong, because you couldn't help but have kids. Not a lot of birth control back then, except for worst case scenarios that come after the pregnancy, or I don't know, what do they have? Bladders from some goat or something, some sort of intestines you'd cinch around yourself, and What would you use? What was the birth control of the day? Shaking up a bottle of Dr. Pepper and washing it out? I don't know. So it seems like kids would have been everywhere. Everybody would have had enough kids that you can afford to lose one or two, or, in an industrial fire or a mine collapse, or, some sort of railroad kid getting, run over by the train, or maybe getting his legs chopped off, and then someone takes him out behind the shed number 4 and hits him with a shovel and kills him so that they don't have to pay for his disability. He's just I don't know. But kids can be useful. I don't know if they're, JJ today, I couldn't get him to change my brake pads on my car. I sent him out there to do it. I've shown him how to do it. I've done it myself and said, look, this is how you do it. I've made him hold the tool, and he still couldn't do it. And, which made me angry. I'll just say that. You teach a kid to fish, and you expect him to go out and be able to catch fish. And he couldn't do it. Scared of the, well, part of it was my fault. I mean, I didn't put jack stands under the car last time. And he did have it was barely, his foot got stuck under it, but it wasn't crushed like happened to me. His foot, he was fine. It was his shoe that took the damage. But I should have had jack stands under there. And I told him, look, I was rushing the job. I was overconfident. I figured I could just leave it up on the jack and everything would be fine. And it's an old jack. It's the one I had when I was young. But he's terrified of jacks and cars and everything now. I should have started him younger on the brakes. Anyway, everybody back then was tough. Tougher than the average person then would have been in the top 1% of tough people today. Just the average girl, average young man, working in some godforsaken, sweltering factory, watching a machine stamp out stuff. Toughness on a level that just every day was such a battle. You had to punch through your day. You had to work at everything. And because it was the past, everything weighed a ton. Everything was heavy. Telephone, those early telephones, like 60 pounds, something like that, to hold that thing up to your head. Everything was heavy. Everything was a struggle. And the music was so lively. When you hear it, da, 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 everything's just, I don't know if that's a foxtrot or what the dance was that people were doing back then. Pre-Charleston. This is when ballroom sort of dances were the social order of the day. I guess the dance, right? No movies. You go to the dance. And the music was lively. People finally getting to move. If you did work on a line, and the production lines didn't come till later, honestly. All that early industrial stuff was extractive jobs, mining, squeezing steel mill stuff. There wasn't a lot of mass production in the early days of industrialization. That came later. Mass production where, goods were stamped out and sent along the line. That didn't come until after the car, really, that you had that kind of production. It was Henry Ford, until after the car and production line, everything produced before that was still, hammered out by guys in a machine shop or, that's another thing. The level of precision industrialization takes. If you're going to have a big, giant steam engine that, weighs 60 tons and you're going to have giant joists underneath your floor holding this thing up, it had to be precision right. You can't have it off balance if that wheel isn't balanced and the piston that's holding back all the steam. If that stuff isn't precision to, that thousandth of an inch, everybody dies. Everybody near that thing dies when it explodes or when it crashes through the wall or takes out the wall because it's knocked off balance. There was a textile mill in, I guess it was Lowell, Massachusetts. Was it Lowell? It was one of those, places back east, and the building collapsed just because of the sheer weight of the number of looms they had on the 6th floor or whatever it was. And I guess the women that worked there would say that the building would actually sway once if the looms, when they're all operating random, there's sort of a static energy, or not energy, but a static gravity where everything just kind of is off kilter enough that things just kind of stay where they are. But when machines, for whatever reason, the luck of the draw, are actually sort of synchronized or, not counterbalancing each other and just swaying left and right, a whole row of machines that suddenly get knocked out of whack, and that's what's happening. It took out the wall and crushed the floor beneath it, and then the falling walls and floors from like whatever floor they were on, 6th floor or something like that. Just the weight of it, sort of like what happened on what they say happened in on the World Trade Center. Just the pulling in of the floors just pulled the whole building down on top of everybody, and it, naturally, because there's fabric everywhere. And everybody smoked. Even the kids, you see the kids working in the mines, they're smoking. The whole place went up in flames. They could barely get enough people out of there, and then they got burned bodies being pulled out of there because the machines were out of whack, or the weight of the machines. But you had to have guys who could really work the numbers and do the grinding to make the machine parts not get everybody killed. And that's down to the smallest instruments. You can't lay bricks and build, a 20-story brick building unless you've got accurate tools for laying it out. I'm amazed by brick guys. I've always wanted to take up that craft. To be able to take a bunch of rocks and have them be laid out so that they look dead nuts straight and be structural, that when you have enough, what they call them, courses? I don't remember what they call the rows of bricks, the thing. But you have enough mass there to actually hold up all the cross members that are holding up your floors, or the steel that's bolted into them. Pretty amazing. You don't see that anymore either. Buildings with bricks. Everything was bricks back then. If you had a city, everything was bricks. If you're lucky, you had a steel frame. But I get the feeling a lot of places didn't have steel frames. Everything was brick, cold. Man, what year were those tenements built that by the year, 1904, they already look like they're 100 years old, and it's nothing but squalor. The tenements on the Lower East Side of New York, or, I don't know. I mean, I guess I could check my ones and zeros machine and find out, but just off the top of my head, it always amazes, like you see this in films. It's a period piece, and they take you back in time, and everything looks like it's in brand new shape. And everything, movie set in the 30s, everything looks brand new, but 30s, most of the time when the set directors are done, everything looks brand new. It's like, no, these people, everything they had was already 25 years old. People held on to things back then. Something was built, it was heavy. It's hard to throw it away. You could barely lift the damn things. You might as well just hang on to it. And they lasted a long time. Stuff lasted. Might have been simple in their designs, but when you bought hand tools, they hung around. People don't hand down tools anymore. The people that use tools, they're trying to make sure their kids don't use tools. Back then, if you had all those crafts, they were handed down generationally. And when people moved into the cities, similarly, you'd have second, third, fourth generation people working at a paper mill or a coal mine or something till the town closes down. But who uses tools anymore? Our production is such that when something is no longer viable, you throw it away. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I know it sounds like, an old man complaining about, people just throw it. But it makes sense. If it's cheaper to have a new one than it is to fix the old one, it makes sense. Go with the new one. But things were built better back then. You could make a Model T, and that thing took a punishment. Did it have anything like the comfort level or the precision of a modern car? No, it was barely more than a covered wagon. Barely. Well, that's not fair. It was much more. It had independent axles, and but I'm sure the bounce that one of those had was much like what you would have had if you were lucky in a covered wagon. You hope there was some suspension on your covered wagon. Imagine coming across the country. You're on the Oregon Trail. I don't know if those Conestogas had suspension. That would be like the really deluxo version, I would think. But maybe they did. They must have. I mean, spend the extra, $4 and get some leaf springs on your wagon. That's what leaf springs, everything, in the 1860s, 1870s. Wow, that covered wagon, that's $14. $14. I wonder what that one would cost back then. Studebaker made covered wagons. Fan of the old Studebakers. But I imagine there were, even before companies were making them, the local craftsmen made your buggy or your wagon. And that stuff was handed down. Industrialization wiped all that out. The handing down of tools, the handing down of crafts. If you were lucky, you handed down your job. Your son, your daughter, whatever, got to work with you. Probably your son. If you're a dude, it was probably your son. They were still stratified in terms of, there's a lot of women working looms and working in the textile mills. They weren't doing a lot of coal mining and steel work. And the point of that being, everybody had their place. A man would take a job in heavy industry. A woman might get a job, even just being an actual dressmaker. Not just someone sitting there watching spools of thread get manufactured. The needle trades. And kids. Men, women, and kids. I don't know if there were, I guess you'd see girls working in the textile mills, but you'd see boys working there too, I think. I've seen pictures. Also saw a lot of boys in the heavy industry stuff. I saw a picture of a kid that worked in a coal mine, and his job was to open and close this door for, I guess, the small rail cars that pulled coal in and out of the mine. But I guess they needed it shut for some reason, maybe to keep drafts from going through and blowing out their lanterns. I don't know. But the door had to be kept shut, and it was his job to open and close it for approaching cars. And the photo, you can see the kid sitting there, and you can see there's writing on the wall, and it says, keep door open. This means you, or some sort of 1890s way of speaking. And the kid's sitting there. He's dirty. He's just sitting on the rocks off to the side, waiting for someone to blow the whistle or yell. And the caption said that the kid actually sits in the dark for the 14 hours. That it's the first time he'd seen the actual walls of the tunnel lit, because it's all before that it had only been those little lanterns people had back then. Not a lot of light. And the powder flash from the camera, like they have in the old cartoons, like you'd see in the old cartoons, the guy with the stick and all the powder on it, he'd light it and you get a flash. That flash lit up this cave area in the tunnel. The kid had never seen it like that before, because he spends every day sitting in the dark, breathing coal dust in the dark. Doing what? I don't know. You can't read, you can't write, you can't play video games. You just sit there in the dark. You sing to yourself. I don't know what. But that's the first time he'd ever seen the walls of the place. Amazing. And that's that kid's job until he's old enough to get crushed by a cart or go down into the mine, deeper into the mine, and start swinging his hammer and his shovel, whatever mine. Well, eventually they used power tools, heavy tools. It wasn't all dynamite and picks. Eventually they had actual tools down there. I guess, I don't know. Some sort of pneumatic water pump, maybe, to power their tools. I don't know how they did it originally, but it was dynamite, chisels, some sort of augers. Jesus. And they'd send a kid down into that. And the kid looks like he's 9, because by the time he's 12 or 14, he's definitely old enough to be down there loading. So as a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old's probably at home in short pants, maybe hanging out at the mill with mommy, maybe getting, a year of schooling. It's so funny. The kids who don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. School was the luxury that, the need for children to go to school is the reason why they said we can't have them working all day. They actually need to become educated citizens, or we're just going to have cities full of snarling rabble. I get the feeling a lot of those kids were named Mickey, mostly because Mickey on the Little Rascals. Michael Gubitosi, I think was his name. We knew him, I think, as Robert Blake. Mickey. Hey, Mick. It's like Sully. It's one of those names where it might not even be your name, but they just call you that. Mick. Someone of Irish descent might be called a Mick, or hey, Mickey. Get the feeling there were lots of kids named Mickey back then, because there was Michaels throughout your family. There was 100 Michaels in your family, and the only way to differentiate the Michaels was to name some of them Mickey or Mick. Kids that don't want to go to school. They'd rather, I don't know, what do they want to do? Wander the streets? Can't have kids wandering the streets. Put them in the army or put them in a factory. If only we had factories. Now we're screwed. Kids don't want us to go to school. We can't even send them to a factory. They're just useless kids. Imagine having a kid now. Imagine having a teenager. I had one. I don't feel like he's mine anymore. And everything that entails. Anyway, a kid today, an adult today, nobody compares to those old hard people. How do you compare? I mean, everybody died by the age of, 40. If you made it to 40, you probably did all right. With all your pieces as well. You made it to 40. If you worked in any of those really heavy jobs and you made it to 40 without, boiling off your foot or getting your arm crushed in something or sheared off in a gigantic cutter or spinning device. It's like when I was a kid, you'd hear about like the girl who got her hair stuck in her hair blew up and got caught on the center pin of a ride at the amusement park and got her hair caught in it. And it scalped her. It got pulled up in there and just tore the top of her head off. That sort of relentless relentless power of the machine, working next to a machine. It's not going to stop. You're going to lose a lot before they're able to pull you out or shut anything off. And I would bet there was not a lot of shutting off of the machine. They probably kept that switch high and away from the guy on the floor. All right, we have a switch to shut it off, but I'm going to make sure it's out of reach, and pity the fool who wishes we could have used it. That's the way a lot of guys died back then. Job site accidents, industrial accidents. Now when we have, job accidents, well, people dying at work, it's because someone shot them, usually. I should do that as a joke. I should take another crack at that. I can't even remember what it was. Dying on the job was a very common thing back then. Today, if you die on the job, it's because someone shot you. A coworker was having a bad day in his world of ones and zeros. That coworker had some problems. Was he getting food? Yeah, he had plenty of food. Was he getting sleep? Oh, he had a wonderful, wonderful house, wonderful bed. Was he warm? Yeah. Oh, very warm. So he had food, place to sleep, shelter, and he had a family. What the hell? Could you imagine explaining to people back then the kinds of things we consider to be our problems? Oh, man, I feel so bad for you. You can't remember the PIN for your tablet. Yeah. I lost my second child to cholera. My dog is farting in this room. That is not good. Jesus. Let me open the door. And the window. That'd be, I'd like Cesar Millan to teach us all how to do that. Teach a dog how to leave the room when it's going to cut the cheese. I bet you could train a dog to do that. I don't know if you use the carrot and the stick. Like you kick the dog when it lights went off in your room. Like it's got to be immediate. With a dog, you have to do things immediately or they don't get it. If you, whether it's reward or punishment, if you take more than like 4 seconds, their brain is no longer connected to what they did for the 4 seconds ago. They're thinking about something else completely, and suddenly you're either whacking them or handing them a treat. They don't know what? It's got to be pretty confusing to be a dog. You got 4 seconds to kind of have anything connect. And after that, it's just like the universe is coming at you. Well, I'm getting kicked now. What the hell did I do? Oh, look, what's this? He's holding out something in his hand for me to eat. It's got to be right after the action that you want to either stop or encourage. So I guess I need to be on standby to kick the dog as soon as he lights one off. And the thing is, it's very rare I hear them. That is a superpower that dogs have. They can really be silent but deadly. That's their default setting. They're silent but deadly. I think maybe I heard a dog emit its flatulence. Heard it once. But it could have been my mom. There was a lot of blaming back and forth between those two. Mostly in one direction. That dog took a lot of heat. That dog took a lot of punishing for mom. Well, the Industrial Revolution, it does come around. It's as I was writing it, I wanted to make more of that, but that would have taken more effort. But how it does come around, slavery never would have taken off the way it did were it not for industrialization. But eventually the slaves couldn't keep up. They just could not. They would not have been able to pick enough cotton fast enough to keep their jobs, which are now all in India, which, as I said, is the way it was supposed to be. I think the English did everything they could to crush the Indian textile and cotton industries. And, who could blame them? Why do you want someone else getting it? Why would you want one of your colonies doing that when you can just do that at home? What's the point of having a colony if you can't steal their manufacturing advantages and their resource advantages? If you can't steal them, what's the point of having a colony? I think some colonists found that out. And I read or heard, I can never remember if I've read or heard anything, and a friend of mine did point out that he said when someone says they read something, it usually means they saw a video. But I did hear something about how the numbers can be crunched in such a way that shows that Britain particularly, their entering the slave trade was a net loss. The money they spent, I think, getting rid of slavery, just maintaining that navy, turns out slavery was bad for everybody. Certainly it was bad for the slaves, but I guess in the grand scheme of things financially, it wasn't the best way to go. Just think about that. It's 1850. The cotton gin has made your life miserable. The demand for cotton has got you out in the fields. You're a slave. You're out in the fields 16 hours or whatever. They were out in the fields 36 hours a day. And it's all because of somebody inventing a machine that boosted the demand for cotton. Like, we can clean cotton so quickly now that we're sitting around, we're bored. Let's get some more cotton in here because I can move this stuff to the spinners who are making the threads and the fabrics. Everything's big. It's go time. We need more slaves. And you're out there and someone bought your daughter and your back has some very nasty scars on it. And it's because some mother invented that machine. Man, you got to hate Eli Whitney if you're a slave in the 1850s. You got to hate that guy. You don't know who he is, but... Or you don't even think about it. You've been a slave all your life. Your parents may have been slaves. Or you may have been a slave back in your old country. You lost. You got enslaved. Somebody sold you off. Maybe this is just what life is when you're a slave. The happy slave. You want to set the world on fire. You talk about how slaves weren't completely 100% miserable every second of every day. If you suggest that there was a normal that made life bearable for the majority of people that were enslaved, it's like you're burning a cross on someone's lawn. You have to stand by the notion that every breath drawn when you were a slave was one of misery and sorrow. Same for the Holocaust, by the way. Nobody once ever laughed during the Holocaust in the camps. There they are, the funniest people on the planet, and nobody laughed. Not once, not ever. Actually, Robin Williams played the guy who had a laugh and had a good time while he was wearing the striped suit. Jerry Lewis tried. He tried. I'm not one of the lucky few who's gotten to see any print of The Day the Clown Cried. But there was a guy who enjoyed his Holocaust, the clown. Although I think he cries at the end. Pathos. You're making a film. You want to yank a few tears. You're making a film about the Holocaust. You want to make sure it ends with a couple of tears. So you make the clown cry. Oh my God. If you don't know about the Day the Clown Cried, do some Googling. It's worth it. It's one of the reasons why Jerry Lewis will always be an underappreciated genius. Mad genius. But hilarious in ways that... I can't imagine that film is nearly as good as it seems in my brain. I mean, in either the it's so bad it's good way or the actually it's quite, what if it were an amazing story that maybe people just weren't ready for in 1972. All right, if you don't know, Jerry Lewis in this movie plays a clown who leads kids into the gas chambers. That's his thing. It's his gig. He kind of keeps the kids distracted. Keep them looking over here while you take them down the hallway to the gas chambers. It's kind of like the guy that leads the cattle or the swine down the ramps into the killing floor. And I guess he does it as a clown. Anyway, I can't imagine the film is nearly as good as I can imagine. In real life, it can't be as transcendently brilliant and awful as it seems. And I know people who've seen it, or I know people who know people who've seen it, which kind of takes away some of the charm of it. The more people that see it, the more private get-togethers and copied versions of it that might exist out there, it kind of ruins it. Everything gets ruined. Unless it was built in the 1890s, then it's still in your garage. Nobody hands down tools anymore. What tools would you hand down now? Here's my tiny little screwdrivers that I use to fix my glasses. And this thing here, it's for opening jars in the kitchen. Kind of clamps around there, and I never really use it because it didn't work that well, but there's the tools. Off you go, my son, my girl. These tools, well, they weren't my parents'. In fact, I bought them last year because the ones from the year before were broken, but these are my tools and I'm handing them down to you. What do you hand down to kids anymore? Nothing that you would acquire during your lifetime is, consumer goods. Like maybe you bought a vintage car, or maybe you own a really high quality, guitar or Rolex watch or something that actually holds a value, but nothing mass produced. Nothing I owned when I was a teenager or someone in my 20s exists other than a few pair of underwear. that are still, and a couple of t-shirts. They built t-shirts better back then, and underwear. They're still, you can see through them. You could probably filter coffee through them, or use them as like over a camera to just kind of create a slightly gauzy effect, a slightly more softened image in your picture. You can literally see through them. And I still wear them because there's no actual holes. And that's just the way I roll. I wear underwear till there's holes. Same for the socks. They'll get really thin. I'll keep the holey socks kind of last a little bit longer than the holey underwear. I can't have my junk falling out of the underwear in a hole. That's not good. That's really, you ever had that happen? Ladies, take a break. Guys, you ever have your junk fall through a hole in your underwear? And like you're trying to shift around to get everything back into place, but the hole is too big. Everything's falling through. Or only certain parts of it have fallen through and they're kind of being cinched off. You ever have that happen, guys? All right, ladies, come on back. That's happened to me a couple times. And that's when I say it's time to get rid of these underwear. It's time. They've served me well, but it's time. And then I fold them up, put them back in the drawer. I do that. I have stuff I'm never going to wear again, but I can't throw them away. I don't know why that is. There's a little bit of, I don't know, like memories that are in that thing. And I'm not a hoarder. I do have a lot of stuff, but I guess I should do a cleaning. I keep telling myself I'm going to do that. I'm going to take some time and round up all the old stuff and toss it, or give it to the Goodwill, or give it to somebody. And then it comes to sorting what's going to go and what stays, and almost all of it stays. Oh my God. Am I a hoarder? Jesus. I don't think so. I got a lot of crap, but I'm not hoarding anything. I'm not collecting newspapers. In fact, I got rid of a bunch of old magazines, car magazines and train magazines for the model trains that JJ and I used to use. Got rid of them. Most of them. I had to go through them and decide which ones to keep. But I loaded them up, bound them all up, tied them. Again, trying to show JJ how to do knots, but loaded them up, and then I took them out and dumped them on Wharton Street. Somebody will, I figured some kid will see them. And when I was a kid, whenever I saw stacks of magazines like that on the side of the road, I would always cut them open and look for nudie mags. And sometimes you'd make out. Somebody bundles up his nudie mags when he's going to throw them out on garbage night. He's got them kind of hidden in there between the newspapers. You'd like maybe 1 out of 10, maybe 2 out of 10 times you'd score and you'd hit the nudie mags. That would be the good day. And those magazines would last you a couple of years. They'd be there in your treehouse, your fort, underneath your floorboard that was broken in your room, and they lasted a long time. They're probably still there. I wonder how many people, there's how many young couples move into a house and it's got good bones. They move in and they start tearing things apart and they find someone's old magazines. In this case, during the Industrial Revolution, it would have been little printed cards with photos on them with a lot of hair. Doesn't exist today. Another thing that doesn't exist. They didn't have razors they did, but you didn't have them in your household unless you were Italian. And Dad had the razor, and I don't think the girls were using it. The strop and the razor. So the photos back then had a lot of hair in them, I would imagine. So thank the Industrial Revolution for that smooth finish you get on your head, on your face. Everybody gets razors that are like razor sharp. Imagine the stubble and the cuts you would have back then on whatever it was you might have shaved. Maybe your legs. Some of the Italian girls, their arms. Imagine the stubble you would get until the mass-produced razors of today were in everybody's bathroom. Anyway, Industrial Revolution was fun. It was a lot of work. Thought I'd lost it. Got it back through brute strength. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, me and me cousin won our firm like pride as we went a walking down by the seaside.